Welcome everyone, this is Danny and Karl with Get Wisdom. Today we're going to continue with the channeling series. Karl's going to channel H.P. Albarelli Jr. He went by Hank, and he was quite a prolific author. Maybe not in the number of books, but when he put his pen to paper and wrote a book, he would come up with pretty huge tomes like this, which Karl and I will talk about a little bit. These are the two that I've read from him. There's a couple other ones that he wrote that I haven't read yet. So that's our channeling subject for today. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and thank you, Karl, for doing this with us. Karl and I will have a little discussion about this author and his subject matter and channeling in general. If this is the first video that you've seen in the channeling series, we cover the same ground a lot of times so that we can get people up to speed. If this is the only one you've seen. Okay, so thanks, Karl.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Denny, for hosting, and to all of you who are watching this. This is a continuation of a probing, a searching, a seeking. You can call it many things, but it's curiosity-driven for high purpose. We really want to understand the world better and understand how to make our lives better. And that's really the ultimate goal for us, not simply probing and turning over the rocks and seeing the underpinnings of various things that might be dark in nature. They're always instructive because they tell us something we really need to know, and maybe we're ignoring, but it's still there. And if we don't look at it, it'll still have an impact on us indirectly. So we want to find a higher truth about things. And so this is a divine quest, really. It's the impetus of the divine working through us to shed new light on things from that perspective. And that's why we go to beings now in the light and don't just interview people who might still be involved in things or may have been earlier in their life, but they're retired and available to talk to. There's a special benefit in going to the light and talking to someone who's now back in the heavenly realm, because they'll have a different view of their life than they would while they were here. They see the big picture now, and they can connect the dots much more readily and thoroughly than they ever could, no matter who they were and what role in life. Now, that doesn't mean they'll tell us everything we might want to know, because we're supposed to figure things out. We're really in charge. And that's the demonstration of free will as a mandate for us, that we're supposed to run our world, run our lives, take care of ourselves and one another. When we don't do that or do it poorly, there are consequences, and that's built into the universe as a corrective mechanism. And the human level doesn't do such a good job of that. So we're not here to be substitute police or secret agents and ferret out wrongdoing and so on.
Or even investigative journalists, for that matter, because these kind of questions often don't get answered, or they get sidestepped in some fashion, just because they're not interested in additional karmic entanglements. There's enough of that going on. Yeah. So it's not about the precise details and absolute accuracy of who did what to whom and when and where and why and how. We get a certain perspective, and it has to stand on its own. We can't prove it. That's the nature of channeling to begin with. It's something done on faith. And it took me years to get to where I am, to have confidence in what I'm doing and that it's authentic, it's not corrupted in some way. And that's the unfortunate problem with channeling. It can be easily corrupted, and we know this. And we're told this by our divine sources, the creator of all that is primarily. I've talked to many beings in the light, but I work through the creator because it is the ultimate authority and power. And we're told that more than 90% of channelers have been waylaid in some way. And they're being given hand-holding, and they're being sidelined by false messages from imposters. And it's because they were too trusting. They didn't think this might happen, reaching out to a lofty source.
intuitively. But I can tell you there's lots of low-level beings watching for that kind of outreach, and they'll rush in to say hello and do a handshake. So that's what's happened to most such people.
Okay.
And we're getting a lot of disinformation as a consequence. So it's just my generic warning to be wary.
Right. And so this will stand out, hopefully, for most people. You know, this channeling will sound different from other channelings. And that's a good thing. I mean, it may be a little alarming at first, but I think if people give themselves a chance to think about it a little bit more carefully, they're going to find out that this deserves attention, more scrutiny, more discernment, and the rewards will be great. Because we're not doing this as a muckraking exercise, like Karl said. We're doing this because along with everything else we're doing here at Get Wisdom, we're also offering a solution, which is the most important thing. So you're going to hear from Hank in the light about what we usually hear from light beings, about the predicament that humans are in, and there's a solution to that. So that's the other thing that's offered at Get Wisdom, which is empowered prayer, and ultimately the Lightworker Healing Protocol, which is something that Get Wisdom started with. In fact, that was one of the first things we did when we started Get Wisdom. We made an online course so that people could learn how to do the Lightworker Healing Protocol without having to fly somewhere and have Karl teach it to them or someone else teach it to them. You can actually learn it online. So that's the ultimate goal here, is that we get a better understanding of the problem, and then the solution makes more sense. And then the solution can be applied because you're knowledgeable about the problem. So it all fits. It's all of one piece, even though it may not seem that way in the beginning. So I'm going to take some time here and read a couple things about H.P. Albarelli Jr. For the benefit of the people who tend to listen to these not on video where they could see the scrolling introduction, but on podcasts or the audio versions of these. We also make these available as transcripts. They're for a lot of the channelings we have transcripts. For a lot of them we don't have them yet, but that's something you might want to look into for some of the more earlier and popular channelings. Okay, H.P. Albarelli Jr. is a writer, investigator, journalist who lived in Vermont. Actually, you know what? I'm going to read his. He's passed on now, obviously. I'm going to read his what they wrote in a local newspaper in Vermont where he was from, and then I'll come back to something that was written that you could find on Amazon. It covers some of the same ground, but it gives you a better flavor for who this fellow was. Okay, so Hank Albarelli Jr., author and Burlington native, died on June 18th from complications of a stroke. The eldest son of Nancy O'Neill Albarelli and the late Henry P. Albarelli Sr., he was 72. In recent decades, Hank and his wife Kathleen McDonald made their home in the Tampa Bay region of Florida, where he passed away surrounded by family. From a young age, Hank was a passionate and knowledgeable student of contemporary music, especially blues and rock. In the 1970s, he produced Burlington's first annual blues festival, as well as the first Vermont concerts of Bonnie Raitt, Jackson Browne, and Judy Collins. After leaving Burlington for Washington, D.C. in 1978, Hank worked in the Carter White House and later as a field director for the Service Employees International Union. During the 90s, he returned to an early interest in writing for the theater. His play, The Whole Shebang, was winner of the 1994 Baltimore Playwrights Festival. In recent decades, Hank wrote exclusively investigative journalism pursuing such topics as the CIA's role in the suspicious death of a government scientist, A Terrible Mistake, and, which is this book right here, and The Assassination of JFK, A Secret Order. So that Secret Order was an earlier book. His later book is the book called Coup in Dallas, which is this book right here. Okay. Living just a stone's throw from Gulf of Mexico Beach, Hank delighted in the fact that his two sons from a previous marriage, Damien and David's wife Vicky, had all settled within a few miles of him. He was also a proud and doting grandfather and traveled frequently to the London home of his daughter Nicole, a filmmaker, her partner Paul Centellas, and their two sons Dylan and Ashton. Hank is also survived by Mrs. McDonald, his mother, four siblings, Nancy, Michael, and Beth, and many fond nieces and nephews. And then from Amazon we read, Hank Albarelli Jr. is a writer and investigative journalist who lives in Vermont, Florida, and London, UK. He's written numerous feature articles about the 9/11 anthrax attacks, Biological Warfare, American Intelligence Community, The Death of Frank Olson, The Cuban Revolution, and Social and Political Affairs. Some of his work can be found at the World Net Daily, Cubanet, Counterpunch, and Crime Magazine websites, as well as numerous magazines and newspapers. Albarelli's articles have been acknowledged and cited in many publications and books, including American History Magazine, The Biology of Doom by Ed Regis, Alston Chase Classic, Harvard, and the UNABOMBER, and the 80 Great Conspiracies of All Time by Jonathan Vankin and John Whalen. An accomplished screenwriter and playwright, Albarelli's Life Goes On, written with his brother Dean Albarelli, was published by Witness, a literary journal, performed in several theaters in 1995. Albarelli produced and directed Academy Award-winning Steve Tesich's play On the Open Road. Albarelli is a graduate of Antioch Law School and has traveled extensively throughout Europe, Asia, South Africa, the Middle East, and the Sudan. His first novel, The Heap, was published several years ago, and his fictional account of the infamous narcotics agent George Hunter White's activities in the 1950s will be released next year. I don't think that ever came out. And as will his biography of White, which will be published by Trine Day Books. And then they give Albarelli's website, which I don't think is up anymore, which used to be www.albarelli.net. So quite an accomplished fellow. We have 5 questions for him today, and the book that came out was actually it happened because of his co-writers. He passed away before this was published, and his co-writers took his work and actually took on the job of finishing the book. And Karl and I did a video where Karl channeled Pierre Lafitte, which is the person figured prominently in this book because it was new information about the Kennedy assassination. Hank was able to track down Pierre Lafitte's relatives and get a notebook. And then so he used that notebook to do further research on the Kennedy assassination. And the result of that is this book right here, which is monumental. It's probably the newest, most impactful thing about the Kennedy assassination that's come out in the last 10 years. That would be my guess. So anyway, that's it. That's our channeling subject for today. So with that, perhaps we should go ahead and get started.
All right. I will reach out through the creator of all that is to connect me to the consciousness of Hank Albarelli, and he will let us know when he's on board.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Hank Albarelli speaking.
Thank you for joining us. It was reported that you passed as a result of a stroke. This is before your book, Coup in Dallas, was completed. What were the circumstances of your death?
Contrary to medical insight and diagnostic indicators, my death was not natural, but induced by outside energetic forces introduced into my body. This was partially an attempt to block my further investigative reporting work, but primarily as a kind of punishment. This is routine in your world, that those who are do-gooders will often be punished in some way to drag them down or take them out, especially if they are bringing something that can better the lot of humanity. This is a deeper problem than most realize, because you are used to people squabbling, people fighting, people differing, championing a cause or an ideological stance or a racial divide to defend it and castigate others of an opposite persuasion or perceived as opposite. What is being missed still in the discussion is that there is a non-human contingent as a powerful force. That is what is called the darkness. That is what is called the origins of evil, the workings of evil. It is done through human beings. So this is a clever deception that has worked all through history to leave people blaming one another for all the bad things that happen, when in actuality, evil is brought on you through a corruption of your being and those around you. Anyone who gets too close to the truth of things and wants to reveal their workings and the tracing back to primary points of origin will receive a retribution of some kind, an attempt to sideline them or destroy them outright. We know your channeling work has been instrumental in uncovering many such examples from all walks of life. Even entertainers are subjected to a backlash because they make people happy. This is a perversion much deeper than politics alone, or nationalist forces, chauvinistic worship of one's own nationality as being special and perhaps above others, and as an extension having visions of domination to take over other nations or their territory and claim it as one's own. Those seem like human characteristics, but we can tell you they are not. They are an aberration created within you through a distortion of belief. Life and death is ultimately decided by the individual left to their own devices. Even things like illness have a certain level of input from one's own soul level being, the higher self. The wild card in this is the workings of evil that would commandeer you, manipulate you, or destroy you even for selfish purposes. That changes the dynamic, and it will always impose a karmic retribution and backlash on the perpetrator, but it may not save the victim in the moment. So I got what was coming to me from the perspective of these interlopers, who are dark spirit beings, commanded by an extraterrestrial cabal through the spirits of their own race, trapped in limbo, with nothing else to occupy them but serving as a kind of soldier to commandeer agents of this dark cohort of fallen ones and weaponize them against living persons. This is what is done to soften people up, to corrupt them and their thinking. When people change and become more dour, more aggressive, more prone to violence, more judgmental, more devious and manipulative, it is that force of evil behind such impulses. Anyone might become annoyed or frustrated and have moments of anger in order to vent those feelings. But we're talking about a more concerted and deeper manipulation. There is nothing deeper and more ultimate in its authority than murder to change the destiny of someone. We do not regret our life for an instant ever, because we were serving on the front lines, as we see now, as best we could. If I had known about this hidden cabal as being non-human, I would have pursued it avidly and relentlessly until they took me out. But I was focused on the human level. And that is my message to you, that the meaning of my death is not about the death of a human being so much as the death of a culture, a people, a civilization, and a divine emissary created to surmount the problems of evil and to assist the entirety of the universe with further growth and expansion. A little of that died along with me because I was helping the light to bring forward truth. The things I wrote about were very telling. They were watershed moments, revealing a dark inner working of things. Those who were paying attention were shocked and recoiled by the events in question. The problem is a lack of leadership, that those in power are already in the pockets of the hidden power. This changes everything and makes you not just mortal, but expendable in the eyes of the regime, whatever political stripe it might be. Your days are numbered because of natural vulnerabilities. Your number might come up much, much sooner if the cabal has their way.
Okay, thank you. Looking back on your research on the Kennedy assassination and the investigation into Pierre Laffitte's involvement, and in your book, Coup on Dallas, the sparse information about Lyndon B. Johnson and the Secret Service, what would you have done differently knowing what you now know as a light beam?